welcome to Sarah's Stamping Retreat. Today I want to do something a little bit different and make the backgrounds the focus of our card. So I've got 5 really cool background ideas. None of them are super difficult, but all of them will make a big impact on your card. All of the cards that I've created today are going to have pretty much the same layout, even the same colour palettes, so that really the focus is on different techniques to make our backgrounds really pack a punch. So I'm going to start with a really cool embossed resist technique using this Pattern Play Diamond stamp from Altenew. So I've got an A6 top folding card blank. This is navy matte cardstock from the Paperbox Limited, and it's a UK A6, so it is 4 1/8 by 5 7/8 inches. And then I've cut a piece of white cardstock. This is Nina Solar White, that's slightly larger than that. And that's just so that I can trim it down afterwards. So I'm also going to be using the Altenew Fresh Dye Inks today. So I've had these in my stash for a few weeks now, but I've not got around to trying them yet, and I've been desperate to try them, so I thought I'd try them on this card. So I want to create like a nice blend on this. So I'm going to start with this Dusty Rose. I've literally never tried these before, so we'll learn together how they blend. And Altenew still seems to be doing the other style of inks, but this is kind of their new formulation, so I don't know if the plan's to run the two alongside each other or to kind of phase the other ones out and make them all like this. But I wanted to give these a go and see how they react. And it seems to be going on nice and smoothly at the moment. So then, because I'm switching to a lighter colour, but it's a lighter shade of the same colour really, so I'm just going to make sure I've not got too much excess ink on there, and then I'm going to switch to this pink sand. And I'm just going to go on with that. This one is actually very pale, so I might need a couple of coats of this. So I do like to swatch my inks, so for those of you that are interested, this is my very kind of rough, supposedly for my eyes only, look at what the Fresh Dye Inks look like. So this is all the ones that they've released so far. I really love this Dusty Rose that we've just used, and some of these, and this Eucalyptus is just gorgeous look. So then I'm switching to the greens. So I'm going to go with Silver Sage first, which is quite a pale green. And I'm just kind of making this up as I go along, because like I say, I've not played with these colours before. So let's go in with the Jade next. And I'm actually creating these cards for the final project of my level 2 Altenew Educator program. So I've got this, and I've got another project which is an upcycling project, and then that'll be my level 2 done. So I'm crossing fingers that I'll pass that and move on to level 3. So because I've got more space than I'd planned, I'm going to bring in this Eucalyptus as well, which is the next darker green. You can see I've made a little mistake down here where I've smudged a bit of ink, but I'm going to cover that over, and then also so much of this is going to be covered that it's not really going to make a difference anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'm going to go in with the Alpine Aster. Now I'm going to finish off with this Water Hyacinth. In most projects this would be a no-no, and I'd either have to kind of cover it up or start again or cut it off or something, but as you'll see in a minute, it's not going to make the blindest bit of difference to this project, so it's all good. So then I'm just going to go back again with another layer of each colour, just to kind of help the blend and help the level of colour. You can kind of see as well that as we come through, as they start to dry, they blend much better on their own anyway. I don't know if you've noticed, like especially this top, look how smooth that blend looks now. Sometimes all it takes is for the inks to dry out a little bit for it to kind of like get much smoother on its own anyway. So I'm just going back through all the same colours. I really think this Dusty Rose that I'm putting on now is just such a gorgeous colour. So now I've got my blended piece, and I'm not worried about any imperfections, because once we've finished you won't be able to see them anyway. And then I'm going to dust this over with my embossing body, just in case there's any bits that are going to grab onto my powder particles. I'm going to use this stamp. So then I'm going to ink my stamp up with my Versamark ink. And then I'm just going to stamp that over my paper. And then I'm going to cover that with Altenew Crystal Clear embossing powder. Now, you probably can't see it on camera, but more of that powder has stuck to this than I would have liked. So I'm just going to use my paintbrush just to clean off the inside of those diamonds. Now I don't know if that is a property of the ink or if I just didn't use my embossing buddy enough. I would imagine that it's probably me not using the embossing buddy enough, or probably using it before I let the ink dry enough, because it is a dye ink and usually dye inks aren't kind of like sticky inks. So I'm afraid that's probably a bit of user error, but hey, we live and learn. Now, that is far from perfect. There's still lots of speckles on it, but I'm going to do it and see how it works. So I'm just going to heat up that embossing powder. So that's done now. So I'm going to come in with my Indigo Skies ink, which is a very dark blue ink, and I'm going to go over the whole thing with it. And you see how now, where we've heat embossed, that's really popping. And you can also see all the specks as well, but I'm going to hope that that kind of adds to it rather than that looking terrible, but let's see what it turns out like. And you know, I actually think I quite like the effect that the extra bits of clear embossing powder are given. It kind of gives almost like a bit of a starlight effect, so it definitely wasn't intended, but actually I don't think it necessarily detracts from the finished product. And you see how that lovely blend kind of like really pops through there. So I'm going to go over once more just to make all of that dark blue even darker. Now, I've seen a lot of this technique around, but I always see people doing it with black ink over the top, and I thought it'd be nice to try it with a different dark ink. I think this navy works with it really nicely. So I'm just going over it with this piece of kitchen paper just to brighten up that embossing even more. And I really like the way that panel's turned out. Obviously, if you like a clean look, then definitely go in a lot more with your embossing buddy than I did. So I'm going to cut that down to go on my card. So this is the same layer setup as I'll be using for all of my cards. So my white piece is 1/2 inch smaller than my card base, and I've cut down this piece to 1/8 of an inch smaller again. And then I've used this happy birthday stamp. This is actually from the birthday greeting stamp set from Altenew, which is this one. It's just full of different birthdays, and you've got the balloon as well. So it's a really useful set I use all the time. And I've heat embossed that in white, and I'm going to be using the same birthday sentiment all the way through my cards. And I'm going to show you 2 ways I've considered laying this out. Partly because I've not decided yet which one I'm going to go for, and partly because everyone's going to be different, so everyone might like a different version. So, because it's quite distressed, I thought I might make it a bit funky and just kind of do it a bit off kilter like this. So still use the same sizes of layers, just do it a bit off kilter, or you've got kind of like standard in the centre. And every time I change it, I change my mind. I think I'm going to go with the centred because that's my plan for all of them, and like I said at the beginning, I want this to be about the backgrounds as opposed to the layouts. So I'm going to glue this on. I think although this wasn't my intended look with it being so distressed, and I tend to go for more kind of clean looks, I do actually still quite like this. So then I'm just going to add on my sentiment just to finish that off. So there's that first one finished. And I hope you can see how well that blend's coming through from behind there. Just adds an extra dimension to the card. So then for my next card, I'm going to use some alcohol inks to create a cool alcohol ink background. So I've got this Frisk A5 Yupo paper. So I'm going to put it on a spare piece of scrap paper just so that I don't get everything everywhere. And I'm just going to have a little play. So I've put a couple of drops on there. And then I'm just going to use the lightest number 1 on my heat gun and just kind of move that around and see what we get. And then I've also got this rubbing alcohol. Pop some of the rubbing alcohol in a pipette and I'm going to drop a little bit of that around as well. And I think what I'm going to do is to pop a few drops of this into, this is just like a plastic shot glass, and I'm going to pop a few drops of the alcohol in as well. And then I've got another pipette and I'm going to just drop some of that over. So next I'm going to drop on some of this Pinata colour brass. I'm just going to let that go around as well. Now I'm going to have a go with this Azurite as well. So now we've got this really cool background and I'm going to set that aside for a minute to dry. So then I've cut down this gorgeous background and I'm using the exact same sizes for all the cards. So I've again got the navy card blank, I've got a gold piece of card that's 1/2 an inch smaller, this is an 1/8 of an inch smaller than the gold piece, and then I've heat embossed this sentiment with Alta New antique gold embossing powder. So it's the exact same setup as the last card. So then I can just glue those together. This cardstock isn't actually mirror cardstock, it's like pearlescent cardstock from Crafter's Companion. And I'll link it below. It's quite a nice one to have because although I totally love mirror cardstock, sometimes it is a bit harder to work with in terms of it being so slippery on the top. And also this one like has a bit more of a kind of matte look to it if you don't want something super shiny. So that's the second card down. And I love how shiny that background is as well. Kind of has a real texture to it. So then for this next one, I'm going to use this Alta New Masonry wool embossing folder. And I'm going to take this piece of white cardstock that's a bit bigger than my card blank because I want to be able to cut it down. I always like with these kind of techniques to just have a bit of room to cut it down in case like it doesn't print properly on one side or something like that. And then I'm going to take that Indigo Skies ink that I used for my first project and I'm just going to swipe this along here so that I'm getting some ink onto the topmost levels. And then I'm going to pop this piece of cardstock in here and run this through my die cutting machine. So then we've got this kind of distressed type background and then I've got some of this metallic gilding polish, Cosmic Shimmer one, it's Copper Shine. So I'm just going to use my finger and rub some of that across some of the more raised bits. So then we've got this cool kind of distressed background. Obviously I've done this with my finger. If you want a more precise look and you don't like the more distressed look, you could do it with a paintbrush and do it like that. But I kind of wanted to one to be a little bit more distressed. So I'm going to cut it down to fit my card blank. So I've made up my layers this time with this copper pearlescent cardstock. It's from the same pack as the gold one I used for the last card. So now I can layer up my pieces again. So I really love how that came out. A really nice kind of abstracty type background. So then for this next card, I've got a piece of navy cardstock that again is bigger than I need it. It's about the same size as my card front. And I'm just using my embossing buddy all the way over there. And then I've got this stencil, which is the Altenew colour block triangle stencil. So I'm going to use this purple tape just to tape that down the sides. And I'm just going to tape it slightly over the side on here. I've cut my cardstock a bit too big, so it doesn't matter that it goes slightly over the side, and that just to help keep that cardstock in place and help it stop slipping or anything. So if you watch my videos regularly, you'll notice that I've shared a couple of the techniques that I'm doing in this tutorial before. I wanted to share them again because I think it's nice to have a video that you can go to with a whole bunch of background techniques in one place. And I just had to have this technique as part of it because I love it so much. So I'm just using this like smoothie blending tool just to pounce some of this Versamark ink refill all the way over this piece of cardstock through the stencil. If you don't have the ink refill, you could use the pad. If you've got a Versamark stamp pad, I think it's called Versamark watermark pad, you know, that you use for heat embossing or whatever other ink you personally use for heat embossing. I quite like the refill because I can get a kind of thicker covering, which I just feel works a little bit better. But if you don't have it, then obviously just use your stamp pad. Then I can remove this. You can see now where the stencil's been. And I want to use the pure white, the golden peach and the gold embossing powders. And I'm just going to lay them on in a kind of rough stripe. And I'm just going to knock that off. And then I'm going to go in with my next colour. And then I'm going to do the white at the bottom. And then we can heat that up. So then here's my cut down piece. You can see how lovely that is. And I've chosen gold to layer it with, so it's the same layering as before, so let's pop that together. Then there's that one finished. And it's got a really nice shine and texture to it. And then for this final card, I've taken these two smaller leaf dies from this Boho Vases Die Set from Altenew. And I've just cut them in a bunch of different kind of greens and teals. And again, my piece of navy cardstock is slightly bigger than my card front because I want to cut it down. Cutting it down just leaves that little bit of room for error. And it also just makes all the edges nice and neat. So I'm literally, all I'm going to do for this is just glue these leaves over the front of my card. And you'll note that I'm changing the direction of the leaves and the colours that I'm using to kind of like add a bit of interest across the card. So then I've got this, and I've got these couple of gaps at the bottom. But actually I think because I'm going to cut it down quite a bit, it'll probably be enough. And if it's not, then I'm going to cut these pieces off the side and add them to the bottom rather than doing any more die cutting. So then I've got this cool background, and I didn't actually have to end up adding any more leaves to this. And then I'm going to freshen it up a bit with some white. I think this would also look really nice with the gold layers if you wanted a kind of more metallic look. So then that's that final card. Then there are all of our finished cards. I love that even though we've used the same kind of colour palettes and the same layout, all the cards look really different. And we've done all sorts of different techniques. We've done die cutting and heat embossing and dry embossing and alcohol inks. So there's lots of different things to try. And I think that also these kind of ideas are really nice for when you're kind of like stuck in a bit of a creative rut and you just want to have a little play rather than having something set in mind. You could obviously make any of these backgrounds really large and then cut them down into card size pieces. So you could do kind of like full sheets of any of these and then cut them down and make them into lots of cards. And I think these kind of texture type cards are really also good for when someone doesn't have a particular hobby or taste or something like this. It's quite nice to have some of these type of cards on hand. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that you got some ideas for techniques you can use for your backgrounds. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate you clicking like below, and you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I've got new videos available. All of the products that I've used for today's cards are listed in the description below, and there's also a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.